battle through it. I'm wondering whether it's the weather, because it's tipping it down, and it's just causing the connection to be a bit unstable. I'm also not yet sure. Our speaker, I can't yet see him online. So that's another reason I've come on live. Is Paul Pritchard? Are you there? We've got a lot of Pauls, but I can't see which one is you. So can you say in the chat, "Hi, it's Paul Pritchard," and then I'll know I can bring you on. Can you tell me where you are, and then I'll be able to bring you on, and we can get going. So many apologies, audience. While I'm waiting for Paul to tell me he's there, I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of admin. As ever, we've got our live captions, so please do click the green button that's at the bottom of the screen, and I will and that will open a new window for you where you'll be able to see the captions. It's great to see the chats running so well already, and please do use that to introduce yourselves and to share some tips and suggestions. As I said, we've got some issues with the connection. If you can't see me or hear me, I'm really apologise, but it all should be working okay. Great to see that some of you can hear me. Paul, are you there? Can you please just say who you are in the chat so that I can bring you on screen and we can talk about inspecting your workplace? Paul Pritchard, are you online? Yeah, great to hear that people can see and hear me. Paul, I really need you to show to just sort of show me who you are, where you are, so that I can bring you on screen. Thank you for your patience, everybody, while we just iron out these little glitches. Like I said, I'm wondering whether it is to do with the weather. It is pouring down with rain here. Another shout out for Paul Pritchard. Are you there? Just seeing if I can see you. Paul Pritchard. Yeah, thank you for everyone who's supporting me. Read the stress. We always, this is like doing live TV. We always wonder how it's going to work. But Paul, I really need you to tell me who you are, because, okay, my colleague Tanya, who is off air, is going to just help Paul join us. Okay, so we are kind of in a seance, aren't we, Mark? Thank you for joining us. I'm afraid once we're live, we have to kind of stay live. So I'm going to just talk you through maybe a bit of intro to the session today. We all know that inspecting your workplace is a really key part of being a workplace health and safety rep. And it's something that you can do when you start being a rep, and it's something that you can do frequently throughout your time as a rep. It's the ways you can meet your members, find out what's going on in the workplace, and of course spot patterns, spot issues, see where things might all be there might be some joined. Often an issue isn't the situation with one member. There might be some joined up things. You can spot problems linked to mapping the workplace. We often map the workplace, find out what issues are, join the dots. Inspecting the workplace is the same. But I'm just going to stop talking for a sec and see if Paul has indeed joined us. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. While we're waiting for Paul, I want to hear from you, from the audience. We've already got a poll running on this webinar where we've asked you, have you carried out a safety inspection at work before? And you can vote yes or no. The votes are currently showing 58 or 54% voted yes, and no, 45%. You can vote in the poll by looking for the little symbol that looks like a graph on the right-hand side. Please have a look at that and you'll be able to vote. You can also, I'm just going to bring Paul on screen now. One moment, and while we're waiting for Paul to join us, please can you tell us what your main issues are when you do inspections of your workplace? What do you find? What do you find helpful about them? What do you find you learn about your members and how it helps you in your role? Okay, Paul. Hopefully you.
I used to be really good at IT.
Hey. Hi, Paul. Great for you to join us. I'm really sorry that we had that little delay at the beginning, but
I think it was more my fault than anybody else's fault. So
no need to worry. So I have been keeping our audience entertained, but I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear from you now that you're here and you can catch your breath. Yeah, just I will stop babbling in a minute, but our audience are really active in the chat, so it's great to see. Also, audience, please do post any questions that you might have for Paul for after we've heard from him, and you can do that by posting in the little section that's called Q&A, where it's got a speech bubble and a question mark in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. As always, we're recording today's webinar, and if anyone, if you miss a bit, we'll send you a recording later. So, Paul, thank you so much, and thanks for bearing with us.
no problem.
While I bring I'm going to bring your presentation up on screen. While we're doing that, can you just spend a couple of seconds just introducing yourself, and then I'm going to look forward to hearing all about workplace inspections.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, my name's Paul Pritchard. I've been a trade union rep, health and safety rep for, well, too long. I first became a rep in the early 80s. Since then, I've progressed into education, firstly as working as a trade union educator for the CWU, their education centre at Alberscott. So if there's any CWU reps, you might have actually come across me. Lastly, I've been working for Manchester College in the Trade Union Education Department, delivering education training courses. So if there's any of my Manchester College students on here, welcome back. I'm glad you've actually turned up, despite my name being on the agenda. Yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience across quite a wide range of work areas in terms of delivering and undertaking workplace inspections. I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not. I've got some practical tips and advice for people who are undertaking inspections. Hopefully we can get those across in this presentation. Yeah, is that okay, Anna?
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I'm going to approach this webinar as well as a newbie, and want to know what I should do if I'm a health and safety rep. What are the top things I need to know about inspecting the workplace? So away you go.
Yeah, okay, right. I mean, what I'm going to do, I'm going to split this up into two parts. So the first part, we're going to briefly look at the legal rights of a USR to undertake a safety inspection, and then we're going to start looking at what the focus of an inspection should be. And then what we'll do, once I've done the presentation, we'll then go into a bit of a group discussion. We'll give you a chance to put some of your viewpoints in, looking at what's working well for you in inspections and what's not necessarily working for you inspections, and whether or not the inspection should be a core element of the health and safety rep's work. So hopefully this presentation won't be too long and too boring, because I think there's far more value in terms of getting your experiences and getting what your questions and problems are, and actually dealing with those. But in particular, getting good practice, because lots of you will have good practice in terms of your own particular workplaces, and it's really useful in terms of being a union safety rep, is getting building networks and getting shared experience, because lots and lots of you are out there actually doing things in varied workplaces, and a lot of the skills, techniques, and strategies are transferable. So we'll do that. So if you want to move to the next page, please, Anna. Right, there's a big problem with workplace, and the problem with workplace is that people are doing things with stuff, and it's inevitable in terms of our workplaces is that we have people coming in and out of workplaces, not necessarily workers. I mean, if you're customer facing, there's a chance that you can have customers in there or other people, service users and things like that. But people are doing things, and they're doing things with stuff, and it's a wide range of stuff as well. So you get quite a lot of mundane activities, which are quite innocuous to most people. You wouldn't think that just sitting down and doing things would be quite dangerous, but there are eventualities that make those kind of operations dangerous. But obviously, there are, if you're working in heavy machinery or in a factory or one of those kind of situations, then the hazards and the dangers are obvious. But a lot of the time, some of the hazards and dangers aren't as obvious as we think. I mean, most employers will conduct necessary risk assessments and construct policies that deal with hazards in workplaces. However, once you bring in people into a workplace and bring in varying ambient conditions and stuff like that, then the best laid plans of mice and men will often go awry. And it's important that what we're actually doing is we're actually observing people at work, how they're actually doing things, and what the actual practicalities are of the work and the impacts on people. And most employers will actually undertake task and job design activities in relation to work. But again, as time develops, things change. We often become complacent in our workplaces. Then those plans and designs can fall by the wayside. So it's important that we're actually out there on a regular basis, actually undertaking an assessment of our workplaces. Similarly, workplaces can vary from day to day, from time to time, and from season to season, and it's important that we take those kind of things into consideration, because things like weather, light, temperature can certainly make a massive difference in the impacts of work on workers. And obviously, we've just recovered, I'm assuming we've recovered from the COVID pandemic, and all of us will have gone through some quite challenging times over the last 3 years. So things like that can catch us unawares. If we have an effective workplace inspection regime and we're ensuring that day-to-day activities are safe, then it can help us in dealing with those unforeseen issues. So it's really important that we understand that if we're not observing people at work, then it's very, very difficult to actually know how if they're actually safe. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Anna. In terms of the legal right to inspect the workplace, for all those of you who've been on trade union education courses for health and safety, you will have been made well aware of the Safety Reps and Safety Committees Regulations 1977, popularly known as the Brown Book, which I'll show you why they're known as the Brown Book a little bit later. In particular, of particular relevance to us are Regulations 5, 6, and 7, which outline the rights of safety reps to inspect the workplace. Now, these set out the legal rights to inspect the workplace, be that a physical inspection or desk-based inspection using information relevant to the workplace. So it's not necessarily just about going out there and being in the workplace. You can inspect documentation and information outside of the workplace as well, which we'll cover a little bit later. So in terms of the physical inspection, Regulation 5 mentions the timing, and it talks specifically about 3 monthly intervals. And that's not a rigid 3 monthly interval. It's a suggestion in terms of the average workplaces. You should be looking at it every 3 months to do an inspection. However, if you're in a changing workplace or if it's a particularly hazardous workplace, then those timings may be increased. If you're in a more static workplace, then maybe there's not necessarily the requirement to do it so regularly. But I would always say 3 months is something that you should be looking at. Yeah. So as a minimum 3 month inspections. What I will say in terms of timing of these inspections, if you've got shift patterns going on and things like that, if you've got shift work, then a workplace is a different workplace at 6 o'clock in the morning, then is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then is at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. So you might want to treat those as different workplaces and do those kind of things. And again, we'll perhaps look at that a little bit later on. It also talks about notifying the employer. You should notify the employer in good time of your inspection. The employer doesn't have to accompany you. However, the employer has a right to be present, or the employer's representative has a right to be present at the inspection. So what that means is you can't walk onto the shop floor and suddenly turn around to the manager and say, I don't want you here while I'm doing the inspection. However, the employer or their representative does not have to accompany you on the inspection. I mean, certainly in my BT days when I was with BT, we used to try and get managers or facilities managers, responsible managers to accompany us on inspections because it made it simpler to identify any issues that we found and get them to recognise what was going on. But there's no requirement for the employer to accompany you. If you don't want the employer to accompany you, then you don't. But you can't insist that the employer or the representative is not present. One thing that the regulations do give us is the right to talk to workers in private. So in the course of our inspections, if we want to talk to individual workers, we can do so without the employer being or the representative being present, so the manager. So you've got the right to talk to people in private regarding health and safety and welfare at the workplace. The regulation also talks about actions following inspection and how to deal with them. So there's some quite good stuff in Regulation 5. Regulation 6 talks about inspections following notifiable accidents, incidents or diseases. I don't think that's really relevant to this particular session because we're on about those quarterly kind of inspections. And if there's been an incident or an accident, then I would set that as something out of the ordinary, and it's perhaps something that you would look at separately, maybe a subject for another webinar, aren't they? Regulation 7 is really useful for us because it gives us it talks about the rights to inspection of documents and provision of information, and this is really useful in terms of preparing for an inspection, because it covers all kinds of information relating to the workplace that may have an impact on health, safety and welfare. And it covers anything within the workplace, such as technical information, staffing data, employment data, accidents or injury or illness statistics, floor plans, any kind of information that you can think that is relevant to health and safety. We have a right to access that kind of information. And as I said, it's really useful in preparing for that inspection. If you want to go to the next slide, please, Anna. The Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regs 1992 are quite useful in terms of defining what a workplace means. And a workplace means any premises or part of premises made available to any person as a place of work, and includes any place within the premises to which such person has access while at work, and any room, lobby, corridor, staircase, road, or other place used as a means of access to or egress from that place of work, or where facilities are provided for use in connection with the place of work other than a public road. That's quite a wide-ranging definition, but what it roughly means is that when you enter in your employer's premises at the front gate, everything where you have access to, so there's car parks, pathways, cloakrooms, toilets, corridors, everything is classed as the workplace, and you have the right to inspect that workplace. So it's really useful for us to have that. What I will say, though, is that you've got to be careful on this in terms of your ability to inspect certain aspects of the workplace. If you've got, I don't know, maybe a substation or something in your workplace, and you're not qualified to enter into that particular area, then we wouldn't expect you to go in there because it would be dangerous for you to do so. So the inspection would necessarily be where you are qualified and competent to go yourself. So that is there. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Anna? Now, when we're actually doing the inspection, it's important that we understand what we need to focus on. Now, traditionally, health and safety representatives have looked at slips, trips, and falls in the workplace, but it's important that we understand while that is a fundamental aspect of preventing slips, trips, and falls, because people are still slipping, tripping, and falling. It's important that we understand that work as particularly some of the kind of things that we don't think of as hazardous can have a significant impact on people in the workplace over a long term. So it's important that we take a holistic view of the workplace, and we're not just looking at the mechanics of the work, which is important, but we're also looking at environmental aspects of the work, things like workloads. Are we working people too hard, which I suppose is certainly in my particular job, it's something that we have problems in the college in terms of workloads and stress and things like that. We're also looking at work and attendance patterns, because, as I mentioned before, shift working is something that's out there, and if we're working shifts, then I don't know if any of you looked at things like circadian rhythms in terms of your workforce. Then prolonged shift work, particularly night working, can have a significant impact on people's health and well-being. We also need to look at skills and training, and that's not just for new people within the workplace. It's for people who've been in the workplace for a long time. So anybody in the workplace, do they have the adequate skills for them to be safe within that particular work function? Is training suitable, and is it sufficient, and is it updated, is it regular? Because what you will find in a lot of workplaces that people have been there for quite a long time, but their training hasn't necessarily kept pace with developments within the workplace, and it's important that we understand and recognise that and deal with that in terms of our inspections. We also need to think about sickness and ill health trends. Doing some preparation and doing some research into what's going on in our workplace in terms of the types of sickness that we experience in workplace, the levels of sickness, and any long-term ill health trends will lead us back to looking at our workplace and addressing those situations. Because as we said, if you think about things like repetitive strain injuries, workplace upper limb disorders, things like diseases, industrial disease, skin disease, and stuff like that. They are caused by prolonged exposure, and they're not obviously obvious in the short term. So we need to start looking at trends and stuff like that. And your inspections can lead to that, particularly if you're looking at long-term data in terms of your prep for your inspection. We're also looking at the working environment, certainly in terms of the workplace, whether it's comfortable, in terms of is it cold, is it hot, the noise levels of cleanliness, dirt and dust. And again, ambient conditions can change, during the day or, seasonally as well. So we need to start looking at those and factoring those into our workplace inspections. We certainly need to be looking at welfare facilities within our workplaces, certainly in terms of restrooms. I think, again, back to my BT days, we had an awful lot of telephone exchanges where it was predominantly men who were doing the maintenance on those telephone exchanges. And as the number of female engineers started coming into the workplace, we found that there weren't any welfare facilities designed specifically for women, which was quite a problem for us. So we need to look at those things because workplaces do change over time. We certainly need to look at messing areas. People shouldn't be eating in the workplace, particularly if you're talking about coming into contact with some of the materials that we work with. But we will find that an awful lot of times, as workplaces develop, that places for people to actually go and have a break and take their meals are given short shrift, and they tend to disappear if you're not careful. And we need to look at the cleansing of those areas, of all areas really. We need to look at access and egress, so that's getting to and from the workplace. Because if you remember before, the regulations defined the workplace as starting at the entrance to the employer's premises. So we need to be looking at how people actually get in and out. If there's car parks, we need to be looking at the car parks, storage of the bins and other materials. So we need to be looking at lights in particular, in terms of getting in and out of work at periods of darkness, and in the winter, are these areas gritted and cleared of snow and stuff like that. We definitely need to be looking at materials, the storage of materials, and again, you come across some quite innocuous materials in a workplace, but I'm thinking particularly in terms of cleaning materials, we can have some quite innocuous apparently appearing materials, but suddenly when you start putting them in close contact with other materials, they become explosives. So we need to be looking at storage of materials, and that's any material. We need to be looking at how those materials are handled, and again, the most innocuous, the most plain of materials can suddenly become dangerous if they are mishandled. So we need to be looking at how materials are handled, but really important is how materials are disposed of as well. I remember visiting a site back in my CW rep days where there was some work going on in a building, and it was all fantastically set up within the building to do that work. But what was happening was that The contractors were removing fiberglass insulation from a roof, and they were actually just dumping it in an open skip outside, where those fibers were just blowing about the yard, kind of thing. So the work was being undertaken in a satisfactory manner, but the actual storage and disposal of the materials wasn't, and it was actually causing a hazard, not just for the people at work. It was actually blowing out beyond the employee's premises into the general environment. So it has an impact on the people. Yeah. So do you want to go to the next slide, please, Anna? Oh, that is the next. Yeah, I've just been through those. Sorry. Yeah. I like to think that there's an inspection cycle, and it's laid out there in 3 sections. I mean, ideally, you'd want to start by preparing for an inspection, undertake an inspection, and following up on an inspection. But you can pretty much jump onto that cycle anywhere, because it is by its nature cyclical. So if you've never ever done an inspection before, just doing the inspection can be, your first start, just getting in there, because you don't know what to look for. So once you've done an inspection, it can then lead you into doing the preparation and building up on it. So ideally, you want to start on the prep, but you can actually jump on that cycle anywhere. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Anna? In terms of prep, previous inspection reports, if they are available, are a really good starting point for your inspection. Because what they'll do is they'll give you a history of that workplace. They'll give you a history of what your colleagues have gone out and found in previous reports. And you can also look at how the employer has been dealing with any issues that have been raised, whether they are continuing issues or whether they've actually been resolved in a speedy and effective manner. So previous inspection reports, if available, are a fantastic starting point for your inspections. Information from the employer is really useful. Again, most of our workplaces will have been designed, although you might not think it when you're actually working there, but most of them will have been designed on paper. Somebody will have looked at your workplace, identified what was supposed to be going on in your workplace, and actually produced a plan for what should be laid out and undertaken in that workplace. So that's really useful, because in terms of the layouts of machinery, seating plans, welfare facilities, and all those kind of things. And what it does do, if you've got the floor plans, if you look at the floor plans, you can then, once you actually get out on the floor, you can actually identify changes. What's different from the floor plans, and it gives you a pointer into saying what's actually going on in the workplace as well, which is really, really useful, because workplaces do change. A lot of these workplaces that we work in were built many, many years ago. My workplace, I've just been transferred to an old. I used to work at St John's in Manchester, which was a fantastic, brand spanking new building. I've now been transferred to what we call Sheena Simon campus in Manchester city centre, which is actually the old Central High School, which was built in the late 19th century, which is a massive building, but it's been repurposed for a 21st century technical college, which has many interesting features of it. Anyway, there you go. So workplaces do change. So those floor plans can be really useful. Staff information. It's really important to look at demographics in the workplace, because we do need to identify potential issues. And particularly, you're talking about things like people with disabilities, that's really useful to know. You're talking about ethnic groupings within a workplace. Have you got a significant number of people who don't have English as a first language? That can be quite important. If you've got a predominantly young female workplace, you could end up with issues in terms of pregnancy and stuff like that. So it's important that we know who's in our workplace, what they're actually doing, the types of jobs that they're doing, gender breakdowns, ethnic breakdowns, and those kind of things. As particularly in larger workplaces and places where you have particularly hazardous kinds of materials coming in, because there can be significant impacts for certain groups in that kind of situation. In terms of documentation, do you want to go to the next sheet, please? Documentation that's useful. Risk assessments are really, really useful. Every employer should they have a legal obligation to produce risk assessments. So we should have those risk assessments, and those risk assessments should be available not just to us as union safety reps, but also to the employer, to the workforce in general. But we should be looking at risk assessments, ensuring that risk assessments are current, valid, and fit for purpose in terms of our prep. If you find that risk assessments don't exist, then symptomatic of something fundamentally wrong within your workplace. Maintenance records are really useful in terms of machinery and equipment, pat testing and all those kind of things. Evacuation procedures, particularly if you've got people with mobility issues in a workplace, are really important. And accident and incident statistics will give you a pointer in terms of what's going on in your workplace. In terms of the equipment needed to undertake your inspection, you need to think about what you're going to be doing in that inspection. So you're going to need to record, your findings. So you're perhaps going to need something to write it down, a notepad, pens. You may need to take measurements, so you might need to take a ruler or something, or a tape measure or something like that. A camera is often quite useful. So think about what you're going to be doing. I mean, if you're in a working environment where it's, there's lighting or dust issues or noise issues, then it may mean you need to take a suitable measuring device to capture those kind of things. So think about the equipment that you're going to need to undertake that inspection. And most important of all, think about the PPE that you require. So your personal protective equipment, if there is a requirement for people in the workplace to wear toe detectors and those kind of things, then you should be wearing toe detectors. If it's a hard hat area, then you need a hard hat. If you need high vis, then those kind of things. So you need to think about the PPE that you'll require in terms of you undertaking your inspection as well. Do you want to go to the next one, please, Anna? In terms of notifying, you need to notify an employer in good time. Now, what I used to do when I was active is I used to have a rolling 12-month calendar, so that as I undertook an inspection, it fell off the calendar and the next one came onto the calendar. And what that does is it means that your employer's got no excuse for not knowing that you're going to be taking time off to do the inspection. It also means that you know when the inspections are coming up, and it means that you can then plan towards those inspections. But it's really important that you give those, that you have that kind of plan. So I did a rolling 12-month calendar, but whatever works for you. But I would certainly suggest a 12-month plan. Yeah, in terms of giving adequate notice. It's really important that you notify your branch or your union that you're going to be undertaking these activities, because they need to know what you're doing, and just in case some employer goes, oh yeah, Paul's just said he's doing a workplace. Well, he's not told us. So make sure that your branch is aware of what you're doing and when you're doing. That's really important. Other unions are really important, because if they're in your workplace, get them involved. And if you can arrange a joint inspection with other unions, then that's really useful, because they will bring skills, knowledge, and experience that you may not have. I think back to my times in engineering, where we would have people, heating and ventilation engineers, which I didn't have those kind of skills, which would be really useful in terms of talking about ventilation and those kind of things. So if you've got other unions active in your workplace, try and get them involved. Sometimes that's not quite as easy as it sounds, because other unions may not be as active as your particular union. But if they're there, it's always useful to use them. Most importantly, the workers, your members, make sure that they know that you're going to be there and that you're approachable, because your members are your most important tool in the workplace. They're the experts in their workplace. They know what's going on. They will tell you what's going on. But sometimes it takes a lot to get people to pick up a phone and contact people who are in the workplace. So sometimes just being there and making yourself approachable, people say, oh, as soon as you say union, they go, I've got an issue, and it might be a trivial issue, which will, they will think it's not worth ringing the office up or anything like that. But once you're there, they might mention it to you. It's what I call cold custard issues. It seems quite trivial, but when it can be an issue for people in the workplace. So just being there and approaching people is really important. Right, so do you want to go to the next one, please? So in terms of the inspection, what are we looking for? Obviously, we're looking for plants and machinery and equipment, because that's everything that's in there. And when we say equipment, we mean everything within the workplace, be that a computer, tools, lifting equipment, PPE, anything at all that we use in terms of the day-to-day activities in the workplace, it comes into consideration for that. So we're looking for maintenance of the equipment, cleanliness, how it's being operated, and things like safety guarding and those kind of aspects of the workplace. I mean, all too often we hear of situations where people have, been severely injured or even died in a workplace where guarding has been removed because it's not convenient, maybe for people operating on board or for the employer. So it's really important that we are on board with that. So we're looking at anything that's being used in the workplace, no matter how small or trivial. We're looking to see how it's being used, whether it's being maintained, and whether it's fit for purpose and those kind of things. We're also looking for supervision and training, particularly in more hazardous activities. But we need to make sure that people in our workplaces are supervised adequately, and they are trained to actually undertake the job and undertake it safely, and that those supervision and training aspects are maintained as well. So that's what we're looking for there. We're looking at signage and notices, making sure that they are suitable for the location and the activities being undertaken, making sure that they're visible and making sure that they're accessible as well. So, if you've got a large group of people who don't have English as a first language, the kinds of notices and signs suitable for them. If you have people with disabilities, in vision impairments and things like that, can they follow signage and things like that? So it's really important that we make sure that signage and notices suitable, visible and accessible. All the materials and substances that were coming into the workplace, as I said before, they're handled, stored and disposed of safely. We're also looking at movements around the workplace in terms of any bottlenecks, obstructions, do doors open outwards onto walkways, either adequate lighting in passageways and those kind of things. So we're looking at freedom to move around the workplace without obstruction. That's particularly important if you've got people with mobility issues as well. We're looking at fire precautions. So we're thinking about alarms, testing alarms, the fire exits, extinguishers, all those kind of things. We're looking at whether the local fire authority has been round and signed things off and those kind of things. So we're looking at fire precautions. Really important, we're looking at the structural condition of the workplace too. We'll all remember that case, was it last year, where the housing authority were found guilty of causing the death of a child because of the mold infestation. You'd be surprised at the number of workplaces that we have where things like mold are there, because it's not seen as, because we don't live there, but we're spending practically a third of our lives in a workplace. Things like mold are really important to identify. So we're looking at the structural condition of the workplace. Is there mold? Is there asbestos? Crumbling brickwork, broken windows, security of fittings, those kind of things, doorways, all those things. We're looking at the environmental impacts in the workplace, temperatures, lighting, air quality, dust, all those kind of things as well. But we're also looking at welfare, provision of toilets, washing facilities, and that includes changing facilities as well for people in certain types of work. If it's particularly dirty or dusty, you would expect not to have to travel home dirty or dusty. So you're looking at washing facilities and changing facilities. I did a course last year with some nurses and health staff who'd had their changing facilities withdrawn for a new management manager's office in a hospital, which I won't mention. And you're thinking, is it proper at the height of a pandemic that people should be forced to go home in the work clothes? You know what I mean? It's particularly in that situation. So yeah, it happens, and it happens in some of the most unlikely places as well. Messing, as I mentioned before, messing facilities, we're actually expected to eat our meals and stuff like that. We shouldn't be eating our meals at the workplace. And it's really important that we talk to people, because this is a great opportunity while we're out and about to actually get out there and talk to people and ask them what's going on. Right, do you want to go to the next one, please, Anna? Okay, after the inspection, what you do, you need to review your findings. Most important, have a good look at, sit down, because when you're planning your inspection, you should be planning time for the preparation, the inspection, and after the inspection as well. So it's really important that you plan. It's not just about the couple of hours that you take on the inspection. You need to plan in time before to do your prep, during, for the inspection, and after. And that time will include an element of reviewing your findings. One what I would suggest then is that you need to highlight any issues to management that you found, and I would say you need to triage those. If you've got something that you think is really urgent, don't wait to compile a report for it. Get it sorted right away. So get any urgent things dealt with as soon as possible. That could even be what you're doing. Your inspection. If you come across something that's dangerous, then get it sorted as soon as possible. But you can triage. You can categorize people. Things that need doing urgently, things that are not so urgent, and things that could take a little bit of time. So you triage it and assess it like that. Inform your branch of your findings. Most important that you keep your branch or your union informed of what you're doing and what you've come across, so that they're aware of it. Because it might be that you're not available. The days of a job for life have gone. Sometimes you'll find yourself moving on to other places, pastures new or what have you. So it's important that the branch is aware of what's going on and that they can keep a record of it. So file your report for future reference, because it's really important that you keep that history of what's gone on in terms of previous inspections. Any actions that you've highlighted, follow up on them. So make sure that you look at, you're revisiting on a regular basis that inspection, and any issues that you've identified, then you're chasing up and make sure that they're actually dealt with. Yeah, so that's really important, because what you don't want to do is just leave it till the next inspection, find out that nothing's been done about it. You need to chase up those things. Yeah. Most importantly, let the members know what you've done, because all too often trade unions they're seen as bad news organisations a lot of the time, because you only seem to have involvement with the trade union when there's either bad news or you need help and assistance, or you have to pay for it. So when you get subscriptions out of it, it's a bit like the guys who's working outside my house at the minute doing the electricity. The only time you have any contact with the electricity company is when the bill drops on your mat. Oops, the bill drops on your mat, or when there's a problem. So it's important that if you're out there doing good stuff for your members, that you let them know what you've done, particularly if you've had any successes as well. Do you want to go to the next one, please, Anna? These are three publications from the TUC, funnily enough, that are really useful for you in terms of undertaking your roles, and you may be familiar with these. On the left are the SRSC regulations, the Safety Reps and Safety Committee regulations. For some reason unknown, these are known as the Brown Book. I can't understand why. There's a link there. I don't know if that's going to come up. Is it going to come up, Anna?
It won't on here, but what we'll do is include a link to it in all the resources that we send round afterwards. Don't worry about that.
So the SRS3 regulations are there. There is a TUC health and safety inspections guide, which is really useful. It's about 13 years old, but it's still valid. Still some quite good stuff in that. And there's the hazards at work book, which I find is really, really useful. It's your go-to reference in terms of undertaking your role as a health and safety rep. It's available from the TUC. If you're in a TUC affiliated union, I think it's £22. If you're on a TUC education course, I think it's £19, but you can get bulk discounts and stuff. So get your union to buy it for you if you haven't already got it, because it's really, really useful. Right, okay, so that's my spiel done. It took up a little bit longer than I thought, and I was a bit late, but any questions that we've come across there? What's working well in our workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of questions that have come in. I'm going to try and batch them so that we can answer as many as possible rather than each individual one. Just to let you catch your breath for a minute, Paul. I mean, we've had quite a few questions about templates that we can use for these inspections, and I'll answer that. Some of my colleagues who are also on the call have posted links to some templates that you can use. There's also one in the Brown Book that we mentioned on this couple of screens ago, so we'll send around the link to that following the webinar, so do take a look at those templates. Okay, I think a really great question that we've had that I think is very relevant. What is a good way to incorporate a stress risk assessment within a typical workplace inspection? What advice have you got for that, please, Paul?
Well, that's interesting, because you're not necessarily going to get around all your work, all the workforce on your inspection, so you need to make sure that you're including people. Whenever I've undertaken or been involved in workplace stress surveys, it's been done over a period of time. It's not actually, it's as part of it. I mean, it's a prep as a part of a workplace inspection. So we've done it spread over maybe a 2-week period to give people, everyone a chance to actually participate, because it's very difficult to go around and capture everybody's, certainly in terms of time, just asking those questions of individuals. It's not necessarily something I would be doing on a physical inspection.
I think it's also worth saying we can always include that in the mapping of the workplace when you're mapping your members. That's something that you can ask members about, and include it in the information you gather on a mapping exercise. But remember, as I said at the beginning, you can join up the information that you get from mapping with a physical inspection. They sort of exist together to bring you information about the workplace in general. Okay, how can
just on that, I think Liz Larkin has just put up a particularly useful point there. HSE stress and wellbeing surveys are good for because there's no point reinventing the wheel on these kind of things, because there's an awful lot of research that's been done out of there. So there's, whether that's through the TUC or other organisations, people will have looked at these things, and you can tailor those things to meet your own workplace.
Yeah, that's great. We'll include the link to that as well in our resources list. Okay. A viewer has asked, how can we escalate these issues if no actions are taken to resolve something that might have been noticed on an inspection?
Right. Well, there should be processes within your own workplace for your union to actually do that. So you need to make yourself familiar with those. If those aren't working, then obviously you can, if these are particularly severe issues, then you can obviously involve the HSE and those kind of organisations. But you would need to ensure that you've actually exhausted your own workplace procedures. So there will be stuff, processes in terms of raising a collective grievance or those kind of things within your workplace, or you've got your workplace health and safety committee where you can take those things to. There will be somebody corporately responsible for health and safety. So if your manager's not doing it, you can always kick it up the chain and get it to those kind of things. But one of the things I always tell my students, if you're dealing with somebody who can't make a decision or won't make a decision, then take it to the next level. Don't be afraid of doing that, because you're talking about health and safety, and it's their employees. So if something happens to those employees, they are responsible. So it's important that you make the employer aware of those things, and don't be afraid of going above somebody's head.
Great advice. So in your presentation, Paul, you talked quite a lot about asking questions of colleagues, speaking to the people who are there. And a great question has been raised saying, do we have the right to ask questions of non-members?
Interesting question. Yeah, because you as a health and safety rep, you are representing the workplace. So you can actually ask non-members, you can approach non-members, you can approach anybody in terms of health and safety in the workplace, be they non-members, contractors, anybody. You can approach anybody. You have the right to approach anybody to ask about health and safety in the workplace. So that's really important. So just because somebody is not in the union doesn't mean to say that you can't raise issues that they raise, or you can't talk to them about health and safety. They can choose whether they talk to you or not. That's entirely up to them. But you have the right to approach those people about health and safety, their health and safety in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think it's a case as well of we all know that health and safety affects everyone at work. So even if they're non-members, absolutely, it's a relevant issue. And like you said, Paul, a safety rep is there representing the workplace as well. Okay, what rights would someone have to inspect areas which are designated classified? Does security trump safety?
Well, it can do. It can do. If you're working on a military defence site or somewhere like that, then if you don't have security clearance, then that could be an issue. However, I would imagine that for most of us in our workplaces, they will be few and far between. But there are. I did actually look it up the other day. There is if I can dig it out again, there is a paragraph that states about those kind of things. I might have it to hand. I'll do some rooting around whilst we're talking, and then I'll see if I can find it. So carry on.
Yep, sure. Okay. We've had quite a few questions.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Where are we? Yeah. Regulation 7 allows you to inspect any legal documents related to the workplace, but there are restrictions on information where national security is an issue. Disclosure will break a law, or the employer is going to use it in a legal case, so that could be an issue. They might not disclose information there. They can put restrictions where personal information is concerned, or they can put restrictions on information where it would cause significant damage to the business if disclosed. So they can actually do things, put restrictions on that access to information, but they would have to have a really justifiable reason.
Yeah, that sounds like it's helpful. Okay, you talked in your presentation about training. So this is training about like training that is required for safe work using machinery or fire safety, etc., etc. So we obviously know how important that is. How often should this be updated, or should it be looked at? What are some guidance around those areas?
There's no hard and fast rules on that. It depends on what activity is being undertaken. I mean, if it's relatively low level activity, you wouldn't expect somebody to be getting trained every 3 months on office activities. But if you were working in a construction site or somewhere like that, you certainly expect refreshers maybe 12 monthly or 2 yearly or those kind of things. It will be very much dependent on the activities and conditions being undertaken. There are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no set timescales on training.
I expect in some sectors as well, there will be like mandatory times when things have to be updated. So I think it's worth checking there as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that those are being complied with also. Okay, we've had a question about near misses. And the question in particular is, why should they be reported? But as well as answering that, can you explain what a near miss is, please?
Right. Well, a near miss is an incident where there was a potential to cause harm, but no harm was caused. I mean, a close shave, as it were, where no injury or illness was caused. Why should we be actually looking at them? Because but for the grace of God, somebody could have got injured. So you should be looking at those kind of things. So we should be looking at those things, because just for a bit of luck, somebody didn't get injured or killed, or So yeah, we should be looking at those. And it's good business practice to involve the trade unions in looking at those kind of incidents, because, as has been proven in countless research projects, workers are involved in workplace health and safety, particularly union safety reps, then dealing with issues and hazards is a much more smoother process and a much more safer process and better results. So it's really important.
Just for clarification, have you got like one or two examples that obviously anonymised of near misses, so that people can understand what exactly what you mean there?
I'm just looking outside my house, but there's a telegraph pole outside. This happened to me actually, where I was climbing a telegraph pole, and the harness that we used to use at BT, you hook it round the pole, and it failed to engage the hasp. And one of the things that you do is you hold the back of the pole with your other hands to ensure that the clasp is engaged. Luckily, I was doing that, and because my clasp came off, if I hadn't had hold of the pole, I would have fell. So that was a near miss. So I reported that, It turned out that it was exposed to rain and weather. The spring had failed. That's one example.
So I think that's a great example, and obviously quite a dramatic one. But yeah, you also got to the cause of the issue there as well. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, we've had an interesting question here that says, how much are inspections open to personal interpretation?
Well, course, it's very subjective because you are there. It depends on your skills, experience, and knowledge, doesn't it? I mean, one of the things that can be a problem in inspections, certainly in terms of personal experience, is when you become an expert in that workplace, and you then become dismissive of low-level risk because you're used to it. So that can be a problem. So those kind of subjective viewpoints, you're used to dealing with that. It's not an issue. Whereas somebody who's come into the workplace who doesn't necessarily have your experience or knowledge, it could be an issue for them. So yeah, it can be. But what I will say about your role as a union safety rep is that, as it says in regulations, you're not liable for acts or omissions if something does crop up. So by our very nature, we are ourselves. We take a subjective view of pretty much everything, don't we? So, but because you go out there and you might miss something, there's no liability in that. If you do come across something, you fail to report it, then that's different. So yeah, we're all human beings. We all have our own viewpoints on things, so they can be subjective. What you view as a hazard, other people might not view as a hazard, and vice versa.
Sure, thank you. Okay, this is slightly different area, but obviously still related. So what authority is there, if any, to make it clear to an employer that they need to share the results of risk assessments with all staff, not just their safety reps?
Well, that's covered by regulation. I forget which particular Health and Safety at Work Act. I shall dig out the actual regulation, but it does say that risk assessment should be available for all for workers. Because what happens if you're in a non-unionised workplace? What happens? Those kind of things. How do you know that your risks, the risks to your health, safety, and welfare have been adequately assessed, but to meet the employer's responsibility? So it is I will dig the relevant regulation out, and you can pass it on.
Yes, thank you. And it'll be in the brown book, won't it?
Yeah.
We just
Well, not necessarily. Yes, not. But I will find out the exact regulation.
Okay, right. Thank you. We've had quite a few questions about lone workers, so I'm going to bunch all these questions together. We've got one viewer who says they have got a lot of lone workers. We're talking in the hundreds here, even over 1,000. Or what are the particular considerations around lone workers and indeed their safety?
Well, lone workers, it's a minefield. I mean, dependence on what the activity is, but even the most, again, I keep talking about innocuous activities, but lone working is a classic example of where the most apparently safe situation can suddenly turn incredibly dangerous. In particular, if you're talking about lone women workers or vulnerable people and those kind of things, so it's a nightmare for me. Again, there are dispensations in terms of for employees in terms of lone working as well, which muddy the issue. If they are working on the employer's work, I mean, if you've got somebody maybe in social care who's a lone worker going into a domestic premises, then they are excluded from some of the things because of legislation, which is really difficult to actually police because certainly in terms of workplace inspections. But if lone workers are working on the employer's premises, in a workplace, then you can use the SRSC regs to actually get in there and do things, but it's really, really difficult. Again, dependence on the work being undertaken, but you would expect that a risk assessment, the employer does then have the duty to undertake a risk assessment for that particular individual in those particular circumstances, undertaking that particular activity. And it's important that they do that because the last thing you want to be doing is putting somebody into a situation where they are in danger.
Yes, thanks. I think it's important to emphasise there that the responsibility for a risk assessment is the employer's.
Very much so, yeah.
Rep.
And I think it's important that we distinguish that because, again, going back to our BT days, BT would have this thing where everybody does a risk assessments, informal risk assessments. That is not the employer's statutory responsibility. That the employer has a responsibility to undertake a safe and adequate risk assessment of all activities that you undertake at work. And it's important that they do that. It's a legal obligation for people. Yeah, so for employers, that's enough to say, yeah.
And the last batch of questions here, we've had a few questions that all focus around the role of management, the role of the employer. So can you talk a little bit more about that, please? And especially, can a manager carry out an inspection without a safety rep present? And what should the role of a manager be when there's an inspection taking place?
Well, can a manager carry out a safety inspection? Yeah, that's their duty to carry out inspections. They should be going around the workplace making sure that it's a safe and healthy environment for all people within that workplace and all people affected by that work. That will be an integral duty of any manager's role, is to actually ensure that the workplace is safe. What was the second part of that question?
Just generally the role of a manager when they're doing an inspection with a rep. If it's a union safety rep who's initiated the inspection, what should that role be of the manager who accompanies them?
Well, the role should be to support, offer advice, offer input to the union safety rep whilst undertaking that role. They certainly shouldn't be obstructive. It is all about ensuring that the safety rep is able to undertake that function and that activity in an effective manner. So it's all about supporting them to do that, because it's in their interests ultimately to identify any issues and get the workforce on board with supporting a safe and healthy workplace. So it's totally supportive. It should be. It could be, that you have managers on your inspection who are also union reps as well, because we do have management unions, and they're really useful to have on your side as well. So don't think just because a manager is a manager that they're not supportive of health and safety. I've had some really helpful managers going around with me who've all they've wanted to do is resolve issues and use as many resources as they can to get issues resolved for themselves and their workers as well. So they've been quite happy to use the union to be an additional prong to tackle an issue. So, but it should be a supportive role. They should be providing information when requested in line with the regulations. They should be, allowing people to talk to people. They shouldn't be, if you need to talk to someone in private, then they should be allowing you to talk to someone in private.
That's really helpful. Thanks for that, Paul. So we've gone a bit over because of the technical issues we had at the start, but I'm going to ask you to wrap up by imagine I am a brand new safety rep. What are the top 3 things I need to take away from this in order to, fulfill my role?
I would say the top thing is involve your members. You can't do nothing in any workplace without your members, be that industrial action, be that health and safety, anything. You cannot, if you're not bringing your members with you, then you're just not going to be successful. That's the top thing. Cultivate relationships, be that with your managers, be that with your members, be that with other trade unions. Relationships and networking are really key to all this, because there's so much help, support and information out there that you can find that you can have the most seemingly intractable of problems. You can talk to someone and say, well, I had something similar, this is how I dealt with it. So build those relationships. And the third most important thing is persistence. Just keep going at it, because health and safety rep is one of those roles where you do make a massive difference. It might not seem that way. You might seem like you're banging your head against a brick wall, but ultimately you are making your workplace safer and healthier for the people that you work with yourselves, but not just for those people. It's for their families and it's for members of the public. I'm a trustee of the Worker Memorial Charity in St Helens, and we've erected a monument for people who've been injured or suffered ill health or died as a result of work. And the number of people that we have who comment, to us when they visit the memorial, the impacts of poor health, safety and welfare at work aren't just limited to work, and it's really important that we carry on doing that. So your role is really important.
And I think that's a really perfect note to finish on. Health and safety reps, as all union reps do, but you really make a difference in the workplace. And I think it's important to remember that. So thank you so much, Paul, for a really informative webinar. I think you can see the chat where people are really grateful. And thank you, audience, for bearing with us with the technical issues at the beginning. We really appreciate you staying. Not your fault. We had some other technical issues, but thank you so much for staying with us.